The desert wind doesn't whisper. It roars. It whips across the vast, sun-baked plains of Syria, carrying the scent of dust and thyme. In the courtyard of the Umayyad governor's palace in Damascus, that wind finds a boy. He is 14. His name is Muhammad ibn Qasim al-Thaqafi. He stands rigid, his young back a straight line against the chaos of the military compound. The air is thick with purpose. The rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer on hot steel, the shouted drills of infantry in the distance, the restless stamp of war horses. To another, it might be noise. To Mohammed, it is a symphony. Each sound is a note in the song of empire. His dark eyes, older than his years, track a squadron of cavalry as they thunder through the gates, their banners, the stark black of the Umayyad snapping like whips. This is his inheritance, not silks or poetry or the shaded courtyards of scholars. This, the grit on the wind, the weight of a sword yet to be earned, the heavy mantle of a name that already carries expectation. He is nephew to Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, the iron-willed viceroy of the East, a man whose very name makes governors stiffen. It is a blessing and a chain. His internal world is a silent storm. The heat of the late sun presses on his shoulders like a physical hand. He hears his own breath, steady, measured, beneath the cacophony. He feels the texture of the rough stucco wall beside him, the tiny grains of sand embedded in it. A memory flashes, sensory and sharp, not of this palace, but of a simpler home in Taif. The smell of wet earth after rain, his mother's voice, softer than this desert wind. It is a ghost. He allows himself for only a heartbeat. Then he banishes it. Sentiment is a luxury for other men. The summons, when it comes, is a single, sharp command from a stone-faced guard. He follows, his leather sandals silent on the cool marble floors that give way to intricate mosaics. The din of the yard fades, replaced by an oppressive quiet. He is led not to the public audience hall, but to a private chamber. The air here is still, smelling of ink, aged parchment, and a faint, sharp aroma of ozone from the nearby armory. Hajjaj ibn Yusuf is a statue carved from ambition. He does not sit on a cushion, but stands before a massive table, his hands resting on a spread-out map. The parchment is alive with lines and markings routes, fortresses, names of lands Mohammed has only heard in tale. Sind, Hind, the river Indus, drawn like a serpent across the page. Look, Hajjaj says, his voice a low rumble that seems to vibrate in the quiet room. He does not greet his nephew. There is no time for it. This is not a map of places. It is a map of consequences. Mohammed steps forward, his gaze devouring the details. He sees the jagged coastline of Makran, the mountain passes of Baluchistan, the formidable dot marking the fortress of Dibal. His uncle's finger, calloused and strong, stabs a point on the coast. Ships burn there, Hajjaj states, the words flat and final. Our ships, envoys bearing the caliph's seal, are imprisoned. Pirates who call themselves kings choke the trade routes. They think the desert has made us weak. They think the distance is our master. He turns then, and his eyes, like chips of flint, lock onto Mohammed's. What is distance to a determined man? The question hangs in the air. Mohammed knows it is not a question for him to answer aloud. It is a lesson, searing itself into his mind. He feels the weight of the moment the dust motes, dancing in a sliver of sunlight, the distant, muffled cry of a muezzin beginning the call to prayer. His uncle's presence is a force, bending the very light in the room. You will learn the language of this land, Hajjaj continues, turning back to the map. Not just the words of its people, but the language of its rivers, its fortifications, its strength, and its fears. You will command not from a palace, but from the saddle. You will lead men who will watch you, boy. They will look for hesitation in your eyes, for the softness of your youth. You will give them none. He finally turns fully, his expression unreadable. The caliph has entrusted me with a needle to stitch this ragged frontier into the garment of the empire. I am choosing the thread. You are to be that thread. Sharp, strong, unbreaking. The words settle in Mohammed's chest, not as a burden, but as a kind of cold, clear certainty. This is the threshold. The life of a boy, with its vague dreams of glory, is over. In its place is a path, etched on parchment and paved with unknown perils. He sees not just the challenge, but the stark, breathtaking scale of it. A coastline thousands of miles away. An empire waiting to be met. He bows his head, a gesture of acceptance, not submission. I understand. As he is dismissed, the sounds of the palace return. But they are different now. The clang of the hammer is the forging of his own destiny. The shouts of the soldiers are the voices of the men he must one day lead. The wind, as he steps back into the courtyard, carries the future. It smells of salt now, sea salt, from a shore he has never seen, calling to a falcon still in its nest, stirring its wings for the first, inevitable flight. The dawn is over. The long day has begun. The desert sun, a relentless forge in itself, bore witness to the shaping of a future leader. Years melted into seasons, and the boy who once dreamt under the vast Arabian sky was now a young man, his frame lean and hardened, his gaze sharp with an intensity that belied his age. Muhammad ibn Qasim was no longer merely a descendant of privilege. He was a student in a grand, brutal academy, tutored by the most formidable mind of his era, his uncle, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. Wasit, Hajjaj's meticulously planned city, was a crucible. The air itself seemed to hum with the ceaseless activity of an empire's administrative heart, a place where power was consolidated and destinies were forged. Here, amidst the bustling markets and the stern, ordered barracks, Muhammad's education was absolute. It was not merely about scrolls and scriptures, though he mastered them with an astonishing speed, delving into history, jurisprudence, and the intricate art of governance. No, Hajjaj's curriculum was far more demanding, far more visceral. From dawn, the clang of steel on steel echoed across the training grounds. Muhammad, stripped to the waist, his muscles straining, would spar for hours under the searing sun. The weight of the scimitar in his hand became an extension of his will, the parry and thrust a rhythmic dance of survival. He learned the precise angle to block a blow, the subtle shift of weight that could turn defense into attack. His body became an instrument of war, honed by endless repetition, by the sting of sweat in his eyes and the burning ache in his limbs. He mastered the lance, the bow, and most crucially, the swift, seamless communication with his steed, becoming one with the galloping beast across the dusty plains. The scent of horseflesh and leather, the acrid tang of exertion, became as familiar to him as the scent of his own skin. But the physical was only one layer. Hajjaj was a master strategist, a man who saw the world as a vast chessboard. He tutored Muhammad not just in the maneuvers of cavalry and the formations of infantry, but in the psychological warfare of sieges, the logistics of supplying an army across hostile lands, and the delicate balance of diplomacy that often preceded or followed the sword. A general, Hajjaj would often declare, his voice like flint, is not merely a fighter, but a mind. He must know his enemy's heart as well as his own. Muhammad absorbed it all, a sponge for knowledge and experience. He spent countless hours in Hajjaj's war room, listening to reports from distant provinces, observing the intricate web of intelligence and command. He saw the burdens of leadership etched on his uncle's face, the relentless decisions, the unforgiving consequences. He felt the immense pressure, the weight of an empire's stability resting on the shoulders of a few powerful men. And within him, a quiet, fervent ambition began to ignite. He felt a deep, almost instinctual connection to this world of command and strategy, a sense that this was where he belonged. Yet, amidst the rigorous training and the intellectual demands, Muhammad was still a young man, grappling with the immensity of his destiny. He would lie awake at night, the desert winds whispering through his chambers, replaying training drills, dissecting Hajjaj's pronouncements. The expectations were colossal. He was Hajjaj's nephew, his protege, groomed for greatness. Every move, every decision, every flicker of doubt or triumph was scrutinized. He knew he was being prepared for something monumental, but the exact contours of that challenge remained shrouded in the future. He saw the vastness of the caliphate, stretching from the sands of North Africa to the borders of India, a mosaic of cultures and peoples held together by a fragile yet fierce unity. He heard tales of rebellions in the east, of pirates menacing trade routes, of distant lands yet unconquered, their wealth and resources beckoning. His heart yearned for purpose, for a chance to prove his mettle not just in the training grounds, but on the grand stage of history. He imagined the roar of battle, the strategic brilliance required to overcome insurmountable odds, the profound satisfaction of victory. As he entered his late teens, Muhammad ibn Qasim was no longer just a promising student. He was a commander in waiting, his intellect honed, his body hardened, his spirit infused with a potent blend of ambition and discipline. He was given minor administrative duties, then commanded small detachments on frontier patrols, testing his leadership in real-world scenario. He learned to read the subtle signs of unrest, to negotiate with local chieftains, to impose order with a firm hand, yet with a fairness that earned him respect. The desert had carved him, Hajjaj had forged him, and now the young lion was ready to hunt. The stage was set, not for a boy's dream, but for a man's destiny, waiting to unfold in the distant, shimmering heat of the east. The air in Wasit does not move. It hangs heavy, thick, with the scent of river silt from the Tigris and the metallic tang of 1,000 blacksmiths hammering out the future of an empire. In the year 708, this city is the beating heart of the Umayyad East, a fortress of sandstone and iron built by the most feared man in the world. And in the center of this furnace stands a boy who is fast becoming a man, standing in a shadow so long it seems to touch the very edges of the horizon. Muhammad ibn Qasim wipes the grit from his brow, his fingers stained with the ink of ledgers and the oil of weaponry. He is 17, an age where most are still finding their feet in the world, yet he carries himself with a stillness that unsettles older men. He does not just walk, he observes. He listens to the rhythmic thud of wooden practice swords in the courtyard, the sound echoing like a heartbeat against the limestone walls. But his mind is not in the courtyard. It is in the inner sanctum, where the air is colder and the stakes are life and death. He steps into the governor's palace, the transition from the blinding white sunlight to the cool, vaulted shadows making his eyes ache. Here, the silence is different. It is the silence of a predator's den. At the end of the hall, framed by arched windows that look out over the shimmering plains of Iraq, sits Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. To the world, Hajjaj is the scourge of Iraq, the iron-fisted governor who broke the back of rebellions and reshaped the caliphate through sheer bloody will. To Muhammad, he is something far more complex. He is the uncle who stepped into the void left by a dead father. He is the mentor who replaced lullabies with the philosophy of governance and the geometry of siege engines. Hajjaj does not look up from the map spread across the cedar table. The map is a sprawling tapestry of the unknown, the jagged mountains of Persia, the winding Indus, and the mysterious, wealthy lands of Sind. The world is growing smaller, Muhammad, Hajjaj says, his voice a low rasp that carries the weight of a decade of war. And yet, our reach remains short. We govern with law, but we survive by strength. Do you feel the weight of it? Muhammad approaches, his boots clicking softly on the marble. He looks at the map, his eyes tracing the lines of the Silk Road. I feel the expectation, uncle. It is heavier than any armor. Hajjaj finally looks up. His eyes are piercing, two dark coals that seem to strip away Muhammad's skin to see the spirit beneath. There is no warmth there, only a terrifyingly high standard. Good. Comfort is for the dead. You have spent your youth among the bureaucrats of Shiraz and the soldiers of Basra. You have learned how to count grains of wheat and how to sharpen a blade, but you have not yet learned how to hold the fate of a people in your palm. The governor stands, his robes sweeping the floor like a desert storm. He walks to the window, gesturing toward the east. Word has reached me from the coast of Makran. Pirates, raiders from the ports of Dibal, acting under the protection of King Dahir of Sind. They have taken our ships. They have taken our people. They have taken women and children who were returning from Serendib. They cry out for justice, Muhammad, but justice is a ghost unless it has a sword to give it form. Muhammad feels a cold shiver trace his spine, not of fear, but of a sudden, crystalline clarity. This is the moment the previous years of training have been sprinting toward. He thinks of the desert heat of Tarif, the lessons of his youth, and the quiet dignity of his mother. He realizes that the boy who played in the sand is gone. In his place is a vessel being filled with the ambitions of an empire. You want me to go, Muhammad says, his voice steady, though his heart hammers against his ribs like a trapped bird. I want you to lead, Hajjaj corrects, turning back with a predatory intensity. I have sent others. They failed. They underestimated the heat, the distance, and the defiance of the king of Sind. They looked at the map and saw land. I need someone who looks at the map and sees a mission. I need someone whose blood is my blood. Someone who knows that in this family there is no middle ground between greatness and the grave. Hajjaj reaches onto the table and picks up a scroll, sealed with the heavy wax of the governor's office. He holds it out, but he does not let go immediately when Muhammad reaches for it. The Shadow of Hajjaj is a dark place to live, Muhammad, the older man whispers, leaning in close. The scent of musk and old parchment clings to him. The world will hate you because they hate me. They will watch you, waiting for you to stumble, waiting for the boy to break under the heat of the sun. If you go, you do not go as my nephew. You go as my hand. If you fail, I will not recognize your name. Muhammad grips the scroll. The parchment feels rough, like the skin of the desert itself. He looks Hajjaj in the eye, refusing to blink, refusing to be the first to look away. In that moment, the power dynamic shifts. The shadow does not disappear, but Muhammad steps into it, absorbing it, making it his own. I will not just bring you the heads of pirates, uncle, Muhammad says, his voice dropping an octave, ringing with a new, steel-edged authority. I will bring you the East. Hajjaj lets go of the scroll. A thin ghost of a smile touches his lips, a smile that would terrify a lesser man. Then go. Prepare the horses. Gather the Syrian vanguard. The bells of the caravans are being silenced by the drums of war. Let us see if the boy I built is made of clay or of iron. As Muhammad exits the hall, the transition back into the sunlight feels different. The heat of Wasset no longer feels oppressive. It feels like a forge. He walks through the crowded markets, past the shouting merchants and the clattering carts, but he sees none of it. He sees the dust of the Indus. He hears the screams of the captives in the dungeons of Debal. He feels the weight of the 6,000 Syrian horsemen who will soon look to him for life or death. The shadow of Hajjaj still looms large, but as Muhammad ibn Qasim steps into the blinding light of the courtyard, he notices something for the first time. The sun is behind him now, and his own shadow is beginning to grow. The world of the early 8th century was a vast tapestry of empires and emerging powers, linked by the restless highways of the sea. From the burgeoning heart of the caliphate, across the Arabian Sea, to the lush shores of Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, trade routes pulsed with life. It was a time of burgeoning wealth, a testament to the caliphate's reach and its burgeoning diplomatic ties. Gifts exchanged between distant rulers were not merely tokens, they were symbols of allegiance, trust, and the vibrant exchange of cultures. In the year 711 of the Common Era, a fleet of 8 merchant vessels, sturdy and laden, set sail from the Ceylonese port. Their holds were brimming with treasures, delicate silks woven with the hues of sunset, exotic spices that promised a taste of distant lands, and precious jewels, including a magnificent collection of pearls, a king's ransom destined for the Caliph al-Walid in Damascus, and his formidable governor of Iraq, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. But beyond the glittering cargo, the ships carried something far more precious: women and children. These were Muslim pilgrims, the daughters of traders, and the widows of Arab merchants who had sought new lives in Ceylon. They were returning home, their hearts filled with the anticipation of reunion, their hopes buoyed by the gentle rhythm of the waves. For weeks, the journey was a balm of blue horizons and an endless sky. The sun, a benevolent eye, watched over the slow, purposeful progress of the dhows. The sea air, warm and salty, filled their lungs. Children laughed on deck, their voices carried on the breeze, while women shared stories of their distant homeland, dreaming of the familiar faces that awaited them. The creak of the wooden hulls, the snap of the sails, the distant cries of gulls, these were the only sounds that broke the serene monotony of the open ocean. There was a sense of invulnerability, a quiet confidence born of the caliphate's power, stretching its protective arm even across these vast waters. But as the fleet approached the coastal waters of Sind, near the bustling port of Debal, the tranquil illusion shattered. The air, once soft, grew heavy with an unspoken dread. From the shimmering haze of the horizon, like vultures descending upon unsuspecting prey, a swarm of small, swift vessels emerged. These were not fishing boats, nor were they friendly traders. They were the infamous Meds, the pirates of Debal, their faces grim, their intentions clear. The first warning was a guttural roar, a savage cry that sliced through the peaceful afternoon. Then came the crash of splintering wood as the pirate vessels slammed into the flanks of the slower, heavier merchant ships. Grappling hooks, flung with brutal force, bit deep into the polished timbers, binding the victims to their aggressors. The serene blue sea turned into a theater of terror. Swords flashed in the sun, meeting the desperate, ill-equipped resistance of the merchant sailors. Arrows tipped with crude iron rained down upon the decks. The air filled with the acrid smell of fear, the metallic tang of blood, and the terrifying symphony of screams, the wails of women, the frightened cries of children, the defiant shouts of men fighting a losing battle. The pirates, hardened by a life of plunder, swarmed aboard. They moved with a predatory efficiency, their eyes gleaming with avarice. The precious cargo was seized, tossed about like common refuse as they searched for the most valuable prize. But their true targets were the people. The women, their faces etched with terror, were dragged from their hiding places, their pleas silenced by rough hands. Children, clinging to their mothers, were torn away, their small voices adding to the mournful chorus of despair. The dreams of home, of reunion, evaporated in an instant, replaced by the grim reality of capture and enslavement. One of the pirate leaders, a burly figure with a scarred face, stood on the deck of the largest seized vessel, surveying his spoils. He barked orders in a harsh, unfamiliar tongue, his gaze lingering on the captive women, their eyes wide with disbelief and fear. Among them, one woman, her face streaked with tears, her spirit defiant even in chains, raised her voice above the din. Her cry, raw and piercing, echoed across the water, carrying a desperate plea that would soon reverberate across an empire. Ya Hajjaj! Ya Hajjaj! It was a call for justice, a desperate appeal to the most powerful and feared governor in the caliphate, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. The news of the calamity traveled with agonizing slowness across the vast land, carried by desperate survivors and anxious merchants. Days bled into weeks, but eventually the grim tidings reached Kufa, the seat of Hajjaj's power in Iraq. When the reports reached Hajjaj, they landed like a thunderclap in the heart of his opulent palace. He listened, his face a mask of stone, as the messenger recounted the brutal details: the ambush, the slaughter, the plunder, and the abduction of Muslim women and children. His fists clenched, the veins standing out on his temples. Hajjaj ibn Yusuf was a man renowned for his iron will, his unyielding resolve, and his absolute intolerance for injustice, especially when it touched the dignity and safety of Muslims. He had built an empire within an empire, ruling with a firm hand, establishing order where chaos once reigned. Now that order had been challenged, his authority mocked, and his people violated on the very edge of the caliphate's influence. The "Ya Hajjaj" cry whispered by the captured women was not just a plea, it was an indictment. It was a direct challenge to his governance, a stain on his honor and that of the caliphate. He knew instinctively that this act of piracy was more than just a random assault. The pirates operated with impunity in the waters controlled by Raja Dahya, the powerful Hindu ruler of Sind. Whether Dahya was complicit or merely negligent, the outcome was the same. The caliphate's subjects had been wronged, and Dahya had failed to secure the trade routes. Hajjaj's mind, sharp and strategic, began to churn. He dispatched a stern letter to Raja Dahya, demanding the immediate release of the captives and restitution for the stolen goods. The response, when it finally arrived, was evasive, dismissive. Dahya claimed no control over the pirates, feigning helplessness or perhaps outright defiance. This was an insult, a direct affront to Hajjaj's authority. The governor's fury, usually a contained inferno, now threatened to erupt. He paced his chambers, the rich tapestries and polished marble floors, silent witnesses to his mounting rage. This was not merely about a few ships or some pearls. It was about the integrity of the caliphate, the protection of its people, and the message that the wind carries secrets across the desert. In the year 709, those secrets whisper of a land where the Indus meets the Arabian Sea, a place of merchants and monsoons, of ancient temples and bustling ports. Sind, the very name tastes of salt and spice on the tongue. Muhammad ibn Qasim stands at the edge of Damascus, 17 years old, watching the eastern horizon as dawn breaks over distant mountains. The leather of his sword belt is still stiff, new, pressed against his hip like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. He can hear the city waking behind him, the call to prayer echoing from stone minarets, the shuffle of merchants opening their stalls, the metallic ring of a blacksmith's first hammer strike. But his mind is elsewhere, carried on that eastern wind. For months now, the court has buzzed with talk of Sind. Pirates from Dibal have seized Arab ships. Hindu raiders have attacked Muslim merchants. And there was that incident, the one everyone whispers about but few dare speak aloud, when ships carrying orphaned Muslim girls from Ceylon were captured by Raja Dahya's men. Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, the iron-fisted governor of Iraq, had demanded justice. The Caliph Al-Walid had given his blessing. Revenge, they called it. Expansion, said others. Destiny, thought Muhammad. He closes his eyes and tries to imagine it. The heat would be different there, not the dry scorch of Syrian summers, but something heavier, wet, clinging to skin like a second garment. The Indus River, they say, runs wider than any waterway he's ever seen, its waters brown with the soil of 1,000 distant mountains. Elephants walk through forests so thick that sunlight becomes a rare visitor, and the cities Dibal, Rawah, Brahmanabad glitter with wealth that makes even Damascus merchants jealous. Still dreaming of glory, boy. The voice belongs to Salim, one of Al-Hajjaj's veteran commanders, a man whose face carries the map of 30 battles in scars and weathered lines. He approaches with the rolling gait of someone whose legs remember too many forced marches. Dreaming is for the sleeping, Mohammed replies without turning. I'm planning, Salim laughs, a sound like stones grinding together. Planning. The governor chose you for this campaign because you're young enough to be shaped and smart enough not to break. But Sind isn't a game board, Ibn Qasim. That land will test every assumption you've ever made about warfare. Mohammed finally turns to face him. Then teach me, and Salim does. Over the following weeks, as preparations accelerate, the old warrior becomes a fountain of hard-won knowledge. He speaks of fighting in regions where rain can turn roads to rivers overnight, where disease kills more men than swords, where the very air seems to conspire against invaders. He describes the Hindu armies, their war elephants that can shatter infantry lines like pottery. They're Rajput warriors who fight with a ferocity born of defending sacred ground. They're archers who can thread arrows through the eye of a needle at 100 paces. Muhammad absorbs it all. He trains until his muscles scream, pushing his body beyond the limits of exhaustion. At night, he studies maps by lamplight, memorizing the curves of coastlines he's never seen, the positions of cities he's never entered. The parchment crackles beneath his fingers, dry and brittle, while outside his window Damascus settles into sleep. His mother visits him one evening, finding him surrounded by scrolls and military treatises. She says nothing at first, just watches her son, this boy, who suddenly seems to have aged years in mere months. When she finally speaks, her voice carries the weight of every mother who's ever watched a child prepare for war. "You have your father's eyes," she says quietly. "That same hunger to prove something to a world that's already decided who you are." "I'm not trying to prove anything," Muhammad replies, but even he can hear the lie in his words. "Then what are you trying to do?" He looks up at her, this woman who raised him in the shadow of his father's death, who taught him to read before he could properly hold a sword, who never once told him his dreams were too large. "I'm trying to become the answer to a question no one's asked yet." She smiles, sad and proud in equal measure, and kisses his forehead like she did when he was small. "Then may God guide your hand and guard your heart, my son, because Sind will demand both." The preparations continue. Weapons are forged, ships are readied, men are assembled. The army grows like a gathering storm, 6,000 soldiers, siege equipment, supplies for months. And at its head, barely old enough to grow a proper beard, stands Muhammad ibn Qasim. The eastern wind still blows, but now it carries something more than secret. It carries the sound of destiny, clearing its throat, preparing to speak a name that history will remember. The invasion is coming. The sun, a molten eye in the eastern sky, cast long, distorted shadows across the plains of Shiraz. Beneath its burgeoning light, an army stirred, not merely a collection of warriors, but a meticulously organized force, a testament to the iron will of Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. Thousands of horsemen, their lances glinting like a forest of sharpened silver, stretched for miles. Infantry, disciplined and grim, marched in rhythmic unison, their shields emblazoned with the crescent moon and the words of faith. Camels, laden with siege engines, supplies, and the precious water skins, groaned under their burdens, their guttural cries swallowed by the rising wind. At the vanguard, a young man sat astride his magnificent steed, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Muhammad ibn Qasim, barely 17 summers old, yet burdened with the mantle of supreme command. The desert wind whipped at the edges of his turban, a faint whisper against the resounding silence of his own mind. He was no longer the eager pupil, the promising strategist. He was the Amir, the general, tasked with an undertaking that had humbled seasoned commanders before him. The immense responsibility weighed upon him, a physical presence in the blistering heat that already began to gather. He felt the eyes of thousands upon him, their hopes and fears, their lives, entrusted to his judgment. This was not a minor skirmish, a border raid. This was an invasion, a march into the heart of an ancient, formidable kingdom. The order was given, a single, clear trumpet call echoing across the vast expanse, with a ground-shaking thud of hooves and the rustle of 1,000 banners unfurling. The army of Islam began its inexorable march eastward. The dust rose in colossal plumes, obscuring the world behind them, leaving only the endless, shimmering expanse ahead. Day after day, the sun beat down with a relentless fury, baking the earth, sapping strength. The journey was a brutal master. Muhammad rode at the head, never faltering, his face a mask of resolute determination. Yet, beneath the stoic exterior, his young mind wrestled with the enormity of the task. He thought of his uncle, Hajjaj, the man who had seen something in him, a spark of leadership, a strategic mind capable of transcending his youth. "Remember, Muhammad," Hajjaj had instructed, his voice a gravelly whisper, "the desert is your ally and your enemy. Master its rhythms, and you master your fate." The landscape slowly transformed. The arid, stony plains gave way to vast stretches of sand dunes, then to sparse scrubland, hinting at the edges of the Indus civilization. The air grew thicker, heavier, carrying the scent of distant salt flats and occasionally the elusive promise of water. Scouts ranged far ahead, their reports painting a picture of a land both rich and hostile. Small settlements, fortified outposts, and watchtowers began to appear, silent sentinels of Raja Dahiya's realm. The army, once a singular, unified force, now spread out, its detachments moving with a calculated precision, ever vigilant for ambush, ever prepared for the first clash. The first true test came weeks into the march, near the town of Kanzibar, a minor stronghold guarding one of the routes into Sind. Its walls, though not grand, were stout, its defenders defiant. As the Muslim army approached, a volley of arrows hissed through the air, a stark reminder that this was now enemy territory. Muhammad, observing from a slight rise, felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, not of fear, but of focused energy. He dismounted, walking among his commanders, his voice calm, clear, outlining the strategy. He ordered the siege engines, painstakingly transporting across hundreds of miles, to be assembled. The air filled with the creak of timber, the shouts of engineers, the metallic ring of hammers against iron. He watched the catapults hurl massive stones, tearing at the sun-baked mud brick of Kanzibar's walls. He heard the cries of the defenders, the answering shouts of his own men. This was the grim reality of war, a symphony of destruction and desperate courage. He felt the desert dust clinging to his skin, the sweat stinging his eyes, the weight of the sword at his hip. This was the moment his training met the crucible of command. He understood, with a clarity that transcended his years, that every decision, every order, carried the weight of life and death. He was the sword hand, but he was also the mind that guided it. After a short, sharp engagement, Kanzibar fell. Its capture, though minor in the grand scheme, was a crucial victory, securing a supply route and a psychological boost for his young army. But Muhammad knew this was merely the prelude. The true challenge lay deeper within Sind, across the mighty Indus, where the formidable city of Dibal awaited, its towering temple and formidable defenses rumored to be impregnable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and crimson, Muhammad ibn Qasim stood alone, contemplating the vast, unknown land stretching before him. He had taken the first step. Many more, bloodier, more perilous, lay ahead. The heart of Sind beckoned, and the sword hand of Islam was ready to answer its call.